Okay. Thank you. Well, the title of this presentation is Different Methods to Achieve the Common Goal for Libraries' Experiences in Accessing Journal Collections. And we are all members of the GALILEO Portfolio Analysis Committee, which is a group, a subgroup off of GALILEO that looks at different resources that GALILEO offers to everybody who participates in the consortium, and helps make decisions about whether those resources are meeting everyone's needs, if maybe we need to look at something else. So it's a lot of fun. And if you're not a member and you want to join, you're more than welcome. We can always use new people, and but we do have a great group. So the other members of the committee that are presenting today are Jackie Blanton Watkins from Kennesaw State University, Tricia Clayton from Georgia State University, Jay Forrest from Georgia Tech, and then me, Jessica Rigg, from Georgia Southern University. We also have some other members of the committee that I listed here, just to give them a shout out, because they're a part of this group too, and I've really enjoyed working with them. I've been the chair for this year and just the chair this year. I was supposed to be vice chair, but we had to switch up, and so anyway, so I am the chair this year, and it's a great group, again, if you want to join us. So I will turn it over to Jackie, who will tell us about Kennesaw State University.
Thanks, Jessica. So I am Jackie Blanton Watkins. I am the Acquisitions and Licensing Librarian at Kennesaw State University. We are a comprehensive RT university located in Cobb County, which is in the Northwest Metro Atlanta area. We have two campuses, one located in the city of Kennesaw and the other in the city of Marietta. And we are comprised of approximately 43,000 undergraduate and graduate students. After our consolidation with Southern Polytechnic State University in 2015, we became the third largest school, I think, in the university system of Georgia, so the USG. So upon our consolidation with Southern Poly, we became the KSU library system. We have two libraries, one on each campus. We have the Horace W. Sturgis Library on the Kennesaw campus, which is the top image, and the Lawrence V. Johnson Library, which is on the Marietta campus in the lower image. Which is actually inaccurate because they've actually moved the entrance, so that's not the entrance anymore. We also have a third facility, the library repository, which is located offsite on the Kennesaw campus, and it's where my office is located. I did not share a photo of that. And we currently have 60 faculty and staff in our library system. So I've included some limited statistics on our collection. We have a little under 500 databases and a little over 200 of which we handle the subscriptions directly for. And we have approximately 370,000 physical volumes and 768,000 ebooks and around 83,000 physical and electronic journals. Oh no, there you go. Okay. No, you're good. Okay. So I started my professional career at KSU in February 2018 as the Electronic Resources Librarian in Collection Development. In this role, I was responsible for gathering and assessing usage, providing renewal recommendations, running database trials, and negotiating license agreements. In August 2021, I transferred over into technical services to become the Acquisitions and Licensing Librarian. I took license negotiation with me into technical services, and now I also handle invoice approval for payment and managing the library system's subscriptions, materials, budget. So that hopefully explains the timeline that I have here. So I'll back up to 2018. So here, everything's new. There's two new positions. There's my position as the Electronic Resources Librarian and the Electronic Resources Assistant who helped me with my job. So because the positions were new, I didn't have any historical information or processes to lean on to get myself acclimated. So what I ultimately decided to do was assume we had nothing and start from the beginning. So I decided to build our usage report repository. But I was lucky enough that I had access to people who had been with the library for several years and could answer my questions about what we had already set up for usage. I worked primarily with my director and our director of systems to get an idea of what sushi harvesting was set up in Alma and how we were handling retrieving and storing non-counter usage. So once I had a fairly good grasp of what we were doing, I decided to undo it. So while I was fine with Alma and analytics, I also knew it was confusing at best and indecipherable at worst for people, especially for people who weren't familiar with Alma. So I decided to pull our usage out of Alma entirely. So I created a place on our unit SharePoint site for usage, and I broke it down into individual folders organized by vendor. And then we exported all of our usage reports out of Alma and saved them as individual spreadsheets in the appropriate folder. So this also made it easier for us to store our non-counter reports and counter reports that we had to pull from the vendors directly. And because it's in SharePoint, it's pretty easy to share a view-only link to the usage report to anyone who would like to see it, which is a lot easier than getting them into and navigating around Alma. So 2019, a year passes. We figured out how, what usage reports we can get out of Alma and what we can't have to pull directly, what resources and vendors aren't counter compliant at all, and all those nitty gritty details. And so I've called this uh-oh this year because in the second half of 2019, while we're also going through this massive library system-wide internal reorganization, one of our systems librarians comes to me and says, oh, by the way, the harvester's broken. We don't know how long it's been broken. So with that information, I realized all of our stuff was wrong. So we go back, me and the e-resources assistant, and there's really not a way to tell what's wrong and what's right. So we just decided to repull everything by hand, which was a lot of work. So we basically just re-uploaded everything that we pulled by hand ourselves and replaced everything in SharePoint. So that was the rest of 2019, part of 2020. So 2020 happens, the pandemic happens. And the good news, though, is that everything's fixed, which is why I called it Everything's Fixed in 2020. We can retrieve the majority of our usage reports from Alma again, and now we're in Counter 5. We create a log of everything that has to be pulled outside of analytics, and I'm able to review all the reports we've pulled and determine what's the most appropriate report to use to assess a specific resource. And then in 2021, I transfer into technical services and we hire my replacement, the resources management librarian. I was responsible for the training regarding usage statistics assessment. And once that was complete, we talked about what the next steps are with our usage. And that's with things like determining what resources should be exempt from subscription review, doing in-depth cost per use analysis on specific resources, things like that. So thank you. So I've talked a lot about this on the previous slide with the timeline. So, and I kind of want to do like a where we started, where we ended thing with at least with what I did there. So I think we've come a long way since I started at KC in 2018. We created this usage report foundation, a central location where all of our usage reports live, established a system of regular usage assessment where we closely review a subscription every 3 years. And I worked closely with acquisitions when I was in collection development to get payment histories so that I could conduct cost per use analyses for not only the most recent 3 years, but also as many years as I have usage and payment information for. So one of my most satisfying accomplishments was the creation of the usage report calendar spreadsheet, which is admittedly pretty intimidating because it has all of the subscriptions we have cost per use analyses for. It records all the reports for a given resource. So for Counter 5, Counter 4, and non-counter, if it's not counter compliant. It identifies which reports to use for analysis and for any like ACRL reporting, how the usage report should be retrieved. So whether that's through analytics, via vendor admin site, or via a contact, like a vendor contact, and any notes on the subscription. I have a series of filters that I've built for the subscription. So like when the next review should occur for any given resource and the following review period, so 3 years after that, and the month when usage review should begin in order to give a recommendation to acquisitions like in time for them to do their work. So when I started, one thing that my library colleagues wanted was more transparency in how collection development decisions are made. So we implemented a system where we could reach out to the appropriate library liaisons with the usage report and the cost per use analysis and explain what our concerns were with the subscription and ask for feedback from the liaisons and the folks in their departments that they support. So it helped identify resources that were no longer relevant to the collection and could be canceled, and identified hidden problems we had that we needed to fix. So one of my favorites was the discovery that we weren't given access to half of the database post-consolidation. We didn't find this out till 2018. So we were able to fix that, and usage suddenly made so much more sense for that resource. But that's the kind of things that we were able to fix. So also now, when we make a cancellation recommendation to our library administration, we can present an abundance of data to make our case to them. Like, we have the numbers from the usage report and the cost per use analysis, but we also have the support from the liaison supporting the department and the individuals from the department themselves. So finally, I left collection development in the summer of 2021. And when I trained my replacement, we discussed what the next steps for usage assessment at KSU were, like after he was settled, after all of that. So now that things are in his hands, I'm not sure how this has changed, but what we talked about are those special cases of resources. So this first question here addresses resources where usage is difficult to obtain. So think of things that have been intentionally designed to be difficult to assess. And so the second question has to do with things like niche resources. While cost per use being under $1 is great for almost any resource, it isn't necessarily always going to be possible for resources that serve a very small sliver of your campus community. And that doesn't necessarily mean bad usage, like for that specific subscription, especially if you can establish a trend that this is normal usage for that resource. So maybe bad usage needs to be higher for that resource. But yeah, and that's where I left off. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, next, Trisha will talk about Georgia State University.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm the collection, assessment, and discovery librarian at Georgia State, and I've been working in collection development for a little more than a decade. So for our, about Georgia State slide, I really just want to highlight a couple things that I think are important and relevant. One is that we are very big. So a couple of years back, when we finished our consolidation with Georgia Perimeter, that puts us as the largest institution in the state of Georgia, with about 53,000 enrolled students right now, and that translates to 44,000 FTE. We do have 6 Metro Atlanta campus locations. We've got 2 libraries, the law library and the university library, and the university library does have a physical presence on each campus. And then the other point is basically about our budget. And for an R1 library, we're fairly poorly funded. And that's for a couple of reasons, I think. One is we have a flat budget. And we all know that in reality, a flat budget is really a decreasing budget when you think about the impact of inflation. And then the other is that we just don't have the funds at our disposal to support as adequately as other R1s, the research that happens on our campus. And so I did sort of a fun exercise by downloading some of the most recent data from the IPEDS data center. And I downloaded all the data for Georgia institutions. So when you look at us in relation to most Georgia institutions, we're doing pretty well with the ability to spend per student at about $170 in the library. But when you compare that with the other 3 R1s, our $170 is well below what the other 3 Georgia R1s can do. And so looking at journal assessment in the past, we have had many major reviews in my memory. These are things where we're involving like the subject librarians and the faculty, and we've had a database review as well. And so in these prior reviews, we've really been able to pick off the easy pickings, you could say. So the duplications or the things that are underutilized, these are already gone. And so what we've got left, largely our big packages were protected during these earlier reviews. And so, this is what we're up against now is say, how are we going to retool our major packages? And for this, the primary tool we've been using recently is Unsub. And that is a forecasting software developed by the company R Research, and it's available for evaluating your big deal packages. So right now they can do 5 publishers: Springer, Wiley, Elsevier, Sage, and Taylor and Francis. And the way it works is it basically takes inputs that are specific to you, your collections and preferences at your library, and then it creates forecasts to help you identify those low value titles that you can target for cancellation. And so we've evaluated 3 packages already as far as finished our evaluations during the years 2020 and 2021. And right now, this year, we're reviewing 2 more publisher packages. And, before you can actually, get into Unsub and start reviewing your scenarios, there's a little bit of work you have to do at the front end as far as putting and data into the system and also making some decisions as far as how what's important to you in evaluating these packages. And that's probably going to require, unless you're working alone, discussion with your coworkers or library administration on how you want to handle this, and as well as probably a little bit of data cleaning and formatting. And so this is the data that needs to go into your consideration in your system. So for the packages, you're going to be putting in your counter report data, for example. But you could put in, so there's a couple optional things, but if you have them, you would want to include them. So if you have post-termination access or archival access, you would want to enter that. And then if you have journal prices or pricing data that's different from the list price, which Unsub is using. And then the parameters, so for each package, you can build different scenarios and you can play with those and make them different. But Unsub has put some work into developing, some research into what they think the good defaults are, but then you can tweak them according to your library's needs. So for us, we decided the default ILL cost of $17 per transaction was good for most of our analyses. But we did choose to tweak the institutional weighting of how much we wanted a citation by our faculty or an article to count compared to regular usage. So we played with that weighting. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is, I just wanted to have a couple screenshots of what Unsub looks like. So this is, you can view, once you put your data in and you get a scenario, then you can view the 5-year forecast. And there's kind of 2 ways to view this front page. And so one of them is to see the histogram of a distribution of cost per use. And that's sort of what you're seeing at the bottom of the screen. Or you could choose to view your forecast as a table view. And that's what that inset is at the top right. And in these views, so when you first start your scenario, you don't have anything subscribed as titles. But as you're working with your scenario, you can add titles in bulk or individually. And that's when, that's what the titles highlighted in blue are. And then in the table view, you can choose to format the columns so that different data elements that you want to view are visible to you. And then you can sort by those. So if you want to see all of the titles for a package listed in order of cost per use, or if you want to look at the what your institution has authored in various journals and sort by the highest of those, you can do that. And then as you add titles, you're going to get the little, when you have a number of subscribed titles, the information off to the left is going to tell you, okay, well, you're based on what you're currently paying. If you do this, you'll save, X amount of dollars. Your subscription fees will be X amount of dollars, and then your ILL costs, and it'll tell you what that will be as a projection. Also, you can, you'll be able to see the breakdown of what your the access to the titles, how much of that will be what you're subscribed to versus open access versus your archive. I think that's it for this slide. And then this is just a screenshot off to the right of, you can drill down into your individual journal titles. There's a lot of information about how much each title will cost, or its percentage of use for open access versus backfile versus paywall use, or what the CPU for individual titles will be. And then you can look at the projection of that in your 5-year timelines. And then just some example scenarios. So we found it helpful in at least one of our analysis to build several different scenarios with that publisher. And so these were what they were. So for instance, we could see, well, what if we wanted to build a scenario with less than titles that we subscribe to that were less than $50 cost per use? And if we compared that to, let's say we subscribe to the titles that were the highest cited titles. So in that package with our budget, how much would this cost? How many titles would that give us? And then we could talk, we were able to have some discussions on what criteria we decided were most important when we were building our final subscription list. Okay, you can move on. And then, so for basically, what have we done so far with Unsub? So we have completed 3 reviews, and the outcomes for that were for the 2 of those publishers, we did unbundle packages in favor of much smaller title by title lists. And, we were, at the time up against some pretty tight, budget cut reductions that we needed to accommodate. So we were able to save up to 40% of our spending on those packages. And then the other publisher, we ended up making a large cut to our core subscription list. And then, coming up in the future, we really haven't had, because there's a lag time between making these decisions and those titles not being available to users. So we haven't had a lot of time to assess the impact of these decisions. So certainly going forward, we're going to be doing that. And I do believe that we'll be continuing to use Unsub as one of our tools, especially even if we're not in big deal packages with all of these publishers. I think that the information that you can see on even your title by title use is important. So I think we'll be continuing with this tool. And I will pass it on to Jay.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Take it away,
Right.
Jay.
All right, thank you very much. So what's special about Georgia Tech? So we are an R1 Carnegie Class 15, so we're very high research. We are an ARL library, one of 3 in the state. We have 48 PhD fields, 32,000 FTE. We just crossed the 30K mark this year, which means all of our subscriptions are more expensive, or at least some of them that are tier-based. We do have a fairly large institutional budget at $2.3 billion. Almost half of that is sponsored research, and a sliver of that, as a percentage, is state funds. Library's base budget is $17.6 million. About $10.35 million is dedicated to collections. That's the base budget. This has been a very odd year for us, and we'll spend about 15. We are lean. We have 21 librarians currently on staff. We have 5 active searches going on and have about 5 other unfilled positions beyond those searches. Just under 700 databases, about 10,000, 9,816 for anyone who's counting. Journals that we directly subscribe to. So this is outside the Galileo subscriptions. We hold about 2.2 million ebooks, 300,000 journals, but only about 25,000 physical books are actually on campus, and that includes archives. All right, next slide, please. So we do journal assessment, and the same methods that we apply to journals, we apply to other things, like databases, other continuing resources. So while journals is a big portion of our budget, if we look at things like collections, which are typically ebook packages that we license or purchase on an annual basis, really about 86% of our budget is ongoing. It's things that renew, things that inflate, that have this same sort of process. We do content management by committee, and so we have a content management group that consists of 4 subject liaisons and the chair. I'm currently the chair in my assistant dean role. And collectively, amongst our liaison responsibilities, we actually represent all of the colleges across Georgia Tech's campus. Added to this group, we have some non-voting members because their feedback is important. Acquisitions librarian, which is currently me, collection assessment librarian, which is also currently me, electronic resources librarian, which is also currently me. And then we have a representative from the staff, either in public services and technical services. And this is really an opportunity for folks that are in library school or have completed a library degree but don't have a faculty appointment to become involved and aware of this process. And CMG's charge is really this, to be the decision-making body on all renewals and new library resources. So next slide, please. So one of the things that's fairly unique to us is that we're actually looking at all 10,000 journals every year. Now, some of these we can do quite mathematically, so we're not making individual decisions, but CMG makes about 1,200 decisions per year about whether to continue, maintain, or add something to the collection. Measures we use are cost per use. We're looking at a 3-year average, counter 5 preferred, unique title investigations preferred when that's available. We're also looking at how often Georgia Tech cites material. We do this in Web of Science right now. It's also available to do in dimensions.ai, which is publicly available. We look at the Georgia Tech authorship rate. How many articles are we producing in these journals? And then we also weight the cost per use as to make sure that we're accounting for different size units. And so if I take music, which has about 20 faculty members, and compare it to electrical engineering, which has a couple of hundred, they're never going to generate a cost per use on the same scale. And so what we do is we do a ratio and we amplify the use of smaller departments so they compare. We take those measures, we make an initial ranking, it's a sum of ranks model, and it gives us this scoring system that's essentially 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 0, if it has a cost per use of less than $5 a use, we're done, we're renewing it, we're moving forward. And then we have these other measures, which are this Moscow-based process, which is must have, should have, could have, won't have, or as I phrase it, why do we have if a score ever gets this low? And this gets mixed with qualitative measures to do a final ranking. And so essential to Georgia Tech College, I don't see a situation where Georgia Tech would not be an IEEE Explore subscriber, for example. We look at alternatives. Where is this journal otherwise available? Is the wall, JSTOR has a 3 to 10 year wall depending on the publisher, is that okay for us and our needs and use? Is there an implication of cancellation? Do we lose a leased back file? Do we lose a read and publish agreement? If we know some granularity, we can often see this in usage where the usage just tanks and goes to like 0, we can then question, is that researcher even here? Is that research being done on campus? All right, next slide, please. And like I said, we can apply this method to different things. So for a journal package, again, we're doing this annually, we're scoring each component title. And so I add up everything that's 0 through 3, compare that to the price of the package. If it's less than the package price, or sorry, if the package is less than that a la carte price, then we renew it. And if it's greater than that, significantly greater, then we'll move to those individual titles. And so, one thing about our assessment is even though our budget is stable, we do have 6% every year negotiated with our campus for inflation, which helps us cover new resources a little bit. We still do cancellations every year. And so it's not just a budget cut that triggers a cancellation process. If it's close, and Wiley's a good example of this, where it's close, where it's approximately equal, then we look at the side benefit. How many ILLs are we going to produce if we shifted to individual titles from Wiley? And so really, If it's within 10%, we're likely okay to renew. That really depends on the budget. New subscriptions, same method. We're just looking at turnaway data. Again, unique item investigations. Scoring system is similar, but it has a little bit of a different meaning. So our ones are something we want to acquire within the next year, twos in the next 2 years, threes next 3 years, fours generally get dropped off the list. And then 5 is that won't have, why not? So those get removed from the list until there's another faculty request. And the only other special thing we do is for journal archives is we're looking at what a forecast of 10 years of use. And if that meets our threshold, generally about $15 per use. And we have funds, then we'll move forward. All right, take it away, Jessica.
Thank you. So my name is Jessica Rigg. I'm the acquisitions librarian at Georgia Southern University. We're a public R2 institution in Southeast Georgia. We have about 26,000 students, 141 degree programs, and 3 campuses. We have the main campus on Statesboro in Statesboro, Georgia, which is where I'm located. We also have another library and another campus in Savannah called Armstrong Campus. And then we have a third smaller satellite campus in Hinesville. We have 2 libraries. As I said, we have one here, which is our main library in Statesboro. We also have Lane Library in Savannah. We have about 70 full-time and part-time personnel, some of whom I see are on this call. Hi, guys. We have 25 faculty librarians and various other objects, as you can see. And I mentioned that we're members of Galileo. For this side, everyone here at this conference is a member of Galileo. So I didn't really need to say that, but I'll mention it later on, and that's important. So journal assessment at Georgia Southern University. In 2021, we received a charge from the university president that we needed to cut library expenditures by $300,000 for FY22. So again, we received that in the spring of 2021. And it has been a process that has taken us the spring of 2022 to make these changes and to assess our entire collection. So we were able to do it. Spoiler, we were able to do it, but it was a long process. And so because we've done this before, like we had similar situations to what Jackie had, where you're looking at cost per use, you're going out to faculty and surveying them. And we didn't call it easy pickings, we called it low-hanging fruit, but basically all of ours is gone too. We have cut everything. We have no fat. We're just trying not to cut into the bone at this point with our budget. But so $300,000, how can we cut this money to meet this charge without causing undue pain to our researchers and our students? So the first phase that we decided to do when we underwent this project, we looked at which resources are safe. You know, we have all these resources, we can't look at everything. I mean, we're trying to look at it as much as possible, but that's just insane. We have a limited amount of time. We have to finish this in at least a year, so we can't look at everything. So of course, print and one-time purchases, we decided were safe. We don't have very much print anymore. We're not as severe of a case or as extreme of a case as Georgia Tech. We do have a lot of print books, but most of our new stuff we're moving, especially for continuations and serials, we're moving to online. And then other one-time purchases, you know, those are just easier to cut because there's an idea that you can always pick them up later. But continuing resources, you drop them 1 year and it's a pain to pick them back up later because they always want to charge you extra fees and all these other things. So we decided that print and one-time purchases are safe. Any software, services, or platforms necessary for our library functions, for example, Digital Commons, which is the hosting site for our institutional repository, we decided those were safe too. We also, of course, decided to leave out any resources not funded by the library budget, which is where Galileo comes in. So anything that Galileo provides, we're not looking at. Anything that's funded by other departments, we're not looking at. And anything that's OA, we're not looking at. So just things that we're paying for, and in most cases, continuing resources. So then the phase 2 was evaluate all other resources internally. So one thing that we've done since I've not since I've been here, but since about 2012, is we maintain dossiers for our databases and electronic packages. So anything that's on its own platform, or even anything that we just pay a lot of money for, we usually will create a dossier for that. So so for this phase, we made sure that we had updated dossiers for everything, even if we didn't have one previously. So anything that's electronic, we created a dossier. And this is just general information to show us the history of each resource that we subscribe to, who we're paying, what we're paying, what the renewal date is, if it works with our discovery system, if it's full text or if it's AI, and other things like that. If there are any back files available as a part of that, we put that down too. And of course, we really highlight the renewal date because this is when we have to make that decision by. We also created overlap analyses. We created the annual cost per use. We calculated it over FY19 and FY20. We wanted the most up-to-date information because, again, this was we started this process in FY21. Or sorry, I'm sorry, calendar year 21. And so FY20 would be the most up-to-date data that we could have used, but it was a weird year for us, as it was a weird year for everybody with the pandemic and everything. So we didn't want to use that and pretend that was a typical year. So we thought it would be more fair to use FY19, which for all intents and purposes was more of a typical year, if not as current. And so we took the average of those 2 fiscal years for all of our resources to calculate the annual cost per use per title for each way that we get it. So like for each package, each title was calculated cost per use, or if it was in a database, that was calculated separately. We also created CSD narratives. CSD is the Collection Services Department, which I'm a part of. It's basically technical services, anything that our cataloging is a part of that, our institutional repository, anything that's bringing it, resources into the library and making them available to other people, that's what we do. So we have more of a hands-on history with a lot of these resources, the back end, how we get them, what we're paying and everything. So we decided to make these narratives available to our liaison librarians and research and services in the research services department and the R&I department. Just to give them a background, we wanted to provide them with the background, how long we've had it, and also some strengths and weaknesses. What does it work with? How much unique content is there? That kind of thing. We also created, and I'll show you an example in a minute. No, I won't. Okay, I'm sorry. Collection analysis sheets, which combined all this information that we had. So all the overlap analyses for each title, the cost per use, all this information was in one easy to read form. And then the liaisons used this information that we provided them to create rubrics. So they would scale each resource 1 to 4 based on various qualities that we felt that our resources needed to have to meet the mission of the university. So yeah, so we used the final, and they were able to make recommendations on each of the resources, whether or not we should consider them for further evaluation as potential cuts, or if we needed to keep them based on their value to the library. And so the final decision for phase 2 was to break up and negotiate 11 big deal journal packages, which is the same thing that Tricia found, that that's where a lot of money goes. And that's one of the ways that we can make some changes really quick to meet our goals. So we eventually decided to break up the 11 titles that you see here: ASCE, Cambridge, Duke, IOP, Oxford, Project Muse, Sage, Taylor and Francis, and Wiley. And I went the wrong way. Okay, so phase 3, which was the biggest thing for us, is when we actually took this information and we sent it out to the departmental faculty. So all the faculty outside of the library. We sent them all a ranked list of all of the e-journals that are included in journal packages under consideration. We included the title, cost per use, usage information, and the liaison librarian's recommendation for each title. So we wanted them to have kind of a starting point about how to look at things, how to evaluate things. So of course, anything that has super high usage, we want them to maybe be more likely to turn that on. But at the same time, we wanted to get their feedback as to what they're actually using. Like Jay said, if a faculty member requests something and they're not here anymore, we want to know that. So if nobody like shouts out for something, then why do we still have it? And so this was their opportunity to say, I'm still here, please keep this. And so the departmental faculty were asked to renew or discontinue for each title in one column. And then they were also asked to rank the title as essential, important, or desirable. And I should say that we created forms with all of the different resources for evaluation. Each form had all the individual titles into it. We made different copies of this form for the different departments, and different departments handle things differently. In some cases, they all work together to give us their feedback. In other cases, they worked individually, and we kind of had to consolidate that information as we received it. And so, and then in other cases, they sent us lists like, please don't get rid of this. And you just completely bypassed what we asked them to do, which is fine. We just were able to incorporate that data after the fact. So, and then we also gave them the opportunity, like I said, to submit comments. So this is the sample form that we sent them. As you can see, it has all the title, well, not all the titles. I'm using Cambridge University as an example because it's something we've had for a while, and it's also kind of, there's nothing really weird about this one. It's the ideal package for what we were trying to evaluate. There's nothing weird. So again, we have the estimated title subscription cost. We have the average annual full text views. And then this is the column where they can tell us whether or not they think we should discontinue or if we should renew it. And then here they were asked to say essential, important, critical, and then here comments. And then anything that's highlighted in green, that just means that the library faculty recommendation is to renew it. So then once we get all that feedback, we have to interpret it. And for phase 4, we use the use adjusted score, where E is the total number of votes for essential, R is the total number of votes for new, B is the average views per year. So we use this number just to have a way to rank all this different qualitative information in a way that's just gives us an idea of what should be on top based on all these different factors. And we retained all the written comments. So that was what our dean made, because ultimately that was her decision. In phase 5, all final renewal decisions were made by the dean of the libraries. We also had another form where the real-time running total of the renewal cost is calculated. So as she went through the list of each title, she would mark it as for renewal, and then that would be calculated so that we would have a way, as Jay said, to compare the a la carte cost as to the entire package cost, because there's no sense in breaking down the package and buying all the titles that have been requested and faculty have made it clear that they need those titles if that cost is going to be more than what we're paying for the whole thing. So this real-time total made sure that she kept on track and that she was able to meet her target and still meet the needs of the faculty, or at least avoid disappointing them as much as possible. So the original decision to cancel 11 journals as our data was updated was altered. We actually renewed Chicago Press, Duke University, and Project Muse in their entirety based on the feedback that we received. And then the ASM journals package, we decided to cancel completely and not even pick up any individual titles because nobody requested them. It was just not used. So that means that we then would cancel and add new titles for 7 journal packages, which is more, as a person who reaches out to vendors and works with them, more manageable for me personally, but that's not what this is about. This is about meeting the needs of the university. So phase 6 was communication and vendor notification, which is, and the titles that we ended up having to cancel and add new titles, journals, individual journals, were actually all through EBSCO, which is a vendor that we have very close ties with, as I'm sure everyone does. So one of the things that I will give the dean credit for is that she was very, 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 I give her credit for a lot of things, but this is one in particular. She wanted to make sure that at every single point in this process that she communicated with faculty, that we were all on the same message. So there were form letters given to liaisons about if somebody asks you a question, here's something that you can give them as a response to make sure that we all were giving the same information, that we weren't causing fear in the faculty. And we have this public facing LibGuide that was available since the beginning. And it very clearly labels every step. You can take a look at it if you want, our timeline. And then as we made decisions, it was updated. So the FY22 renewed resources, that shows you everything that we just went ahead and renewed. And the departmental review shows everything that we use to make those decisions. So the rubrics are on there, the dossiers are on there, so everybody can look at that as they need to. In conclusion, like I said, we succeeded. We cut $300,000. We got to email EBSCO and ask them for a check back, which has never happened before to my knowledge. And we made those cuts. Faculty, there has not been a lot of crying. I don't want to say it that way. People seem to be, we've had very positive feedback. So there was a time, and the reason that it lasted until spring of 2022 was because vendors were kind of slow in rolling back our access. And my colleagues have talked about that, about there is a gap between when you make these decisions and when people actually start noticing the decisions. And when access hadn't changed, we didn't really have that kind of input. But now we've made all those changes in our catalog and we're done for now. And I'm sure we'll do it again. But now I feel like we have the tools in place and a process in place that we can go forward and make things as easy as possible. So thank you. And again, thank you. Any questions? Oh, and here's our contact information if you want to contact any of us. And then we have a link to the GALILEO Portfolio Analysis Committee listserv if you are interested in joining, or if you just have a question. So again, any questions? And I will stop sharing. I can see the chat.
I'm pleased that we were very thorough.
Sorry, Jackie?
I'm pleased that we were very thorough.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Anne, do you have a question? Oh, are you clapping?
Thank you, Anne.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. Those are my coworkers. Thank you, guys.
Oh, Chandra asked, is Unsub a free product? Sorry, Chandra asked, is Unsub a free product?
No, I believe it's priced by your budget. It's not too expensive though. I mean, compared to some things that are out there. So I think it's fairly reasonably priced.
I have never seen something priced by your budget. They're normally like your sister schools. Like, my sister schools get paid a lot more than we do.
Or I think it's the budget. It could be the number of subscriptions you have, but something related to how much money you have to buy resources is how they're pricing the product.
Laura asked, I think JSU pays about $3,000.
Yeah, I know that the $1,000 start, I think, is correct. And yes, so yeah, so that's where we are. And probably we are paying about as much as almost anybody. So again, it's a reasonable product.
Yeah, it's in the realm of our quote.
Laura also asked, has Georgia Tech always gotten inflation money?
It is now an above the line, and so it is factored into our budget every year. Since, other than 2009, the Great Recession, we've been able to articulate this at 6%. For a number of years, we had to go up every year and ask for it. But now it's something that it's considered an above the line cost, so it's automatic.
I agree, Laura. I am also jealous.
And of course, I try to do better than 6% because that's the opportunity for us to get new one-time or ongoing resources.
Oh, and she asked, is that funded centrally or indirects?
Yeah, it is part of the F&A cost associated with the grants. And so as our grant funding increases, there's a portion of that that helps fund the library budget. It doesn't cover it entirely. And even on Trish's chart, you know, there's peers in the state that do a little bit better in terms of per student fees.
And I
But
think
yeah,
that's, oh, sorry, go ahead,
ahead.
Jay.
I was going to say, yes, it does come out of the provost budget too.
That's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this as a panel, is just so we could talk about how we're all in the same boat, even though we're different schools with different budgets and different populations. Laura says, we need your VP of research to talk to ours.
Definitely. But I think all libraries kind of need that. And so we need RACL, we need the RACL plus whoever supervises the library plus research.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone doing something similar that they want to talk about? Okay, well, we'll be available. Thank you all very much for being here, and we appreciate you attending our session. And thank you to my co-presenters too.
And for all those watching the recording later, thank you. We're available to you all as well.